Pippa Hudson. Lines are always open on 021 446 0567.
Right, as I've already mentioned, we're broadcasting live today from the Orion Organisation, which is based out in Atlantis. It was founded in 1982 in a bid to care for local residents living with disabilities of one kind or another, physical, mental, intellectual and neurological. And we're talking here about residents both young and old. And since its founding in 1982, it's really grown into an organization that leads the way in terms of the care and services it offers and in terms of its effort to seek employment for people living with disabilities. Orion is a registered non-profit organization with public benefit status. Firstly, we have to say thank you to them for having us here today. It's such a pleasure to welcome in our temporary studio the CEO of the Orion Organisation, Hanel Cronje, and Marketing and Fund Development Manager, Veronica Pronk. Thanks for having us.
Hi, thank you.
Hanel, we've spoken many times on the phone. It's lovely to put a face to the name and behind the voice. Tell us a bit about the history of Orion. How did it come to be founded in 1982?
There was a need identified, and first of all, I just want to say thank you, but let me continue. Orion was founded because of a serious need for care and support for people with disability. 7.4% of people in Atlantis, I think there are about 300,000 people living here, are disabled, and that's due to various reasons. I think it's more fetal alcohol syndrome, marrying into families, and thirdly also I think difficulties at birth, difficulties not having the medical services required. And with that came this whole need for people to be cared for. They were living under appalling circumstances. And this need was then addressed with starting a little house in Magnolia Street where these people could be cared for. And at the time when they started, these people were taken in, but the need grew and in leaps and bounds, and all of a sudden they didn't have enough space. And ultimately today, Orion is fortunate in having its own premises. We give accommodation to presently 65 adult people with disability, and we hope to grow that number in next year to almost 78. We do it on the group home model, where people are staying in homes like a family. They get together, they do things like a family would do. And that is exactly addressing the need for care and support. But I think later on we will address the whole issue of growing these people, developing them, not only taking care and supporting them.
Absolutely, and a bit later in the show we'll focus in depth on some of the individual units here, your art centre, your work centre, etc. Veronica, I mean, over the years you have created much more than just a safe home here. It is about making a meaningful future for the people living here.
Absolutely.
And for now, can you maybe just give us an overview? You've mentioned the residential aspect. Besides the homes for adults living with disability, what else is on offer here at Orion?
Well, we cater for people literally from Littleys, with our children's care facility, right up until people who are adults who are needing work and who are needing accommodation. So we have the children's care centre. We fetch the kids at school every day. They don't live in on the premises, but we bring them in every day and we take them home every day. So they've got safe passage to and from school on a daily basis. We have an individual development program for every person on this premises, be it a child or be it an adult. So each child develops and learns according to their own abilities. We've got then also an adult residential facility, as Hanel already mentioned. And then the adults that live here and also adults that come in from the community do one of two things at Orion. Either they go into the adult care facility, for those that are intellectually unable to function in the work centre, or they go into our work centre where every day they have to be at work on time. They get tea breaks, lunch breaks. It's a normal, structured working environment, and they do a meaningful day's work with us.
I have to say, it looks like a happy working environment. We went on a tour within the last hour, and you have a picture of a warehouse full of people working on sort of production line type jobs, and you have in your head the picture of people finding it fairly boring and repetitive and looking miserable. Quite the opposite applied. I walked in, there were happy faces, smiles all around.
Plenty of hugs to go around.
Lots of hugs going around too, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, where would all of these people be if Orion wasn't here?
they would more than likely be at home, be extremely bored, or unfortunately, in the case of Atlantis, where there is lots of gang activities and things like that happening, these people, because of their vulnerability, get absorbed into those social systems that are quite dysfunctional.
Arnold, I mean, we'll talk in depth about employment when we get to the focus on the work centre, but you said 7.4% of residents of Atlantis are living with disability. What percentage of disabled South Africans are able to find work? Do you have stats?
I think the government indicated that they will employ 2.2% of their workforce will be those with disability, but they haven't met that target. And I must say that at this point in time, they haven't even met 1%. So it's actually a serious problem, and the problem doesn't stem only from the level of education that people with disability have, but it also stems from almost the willingness of companies to allow these people to grow in the company. They're not allowed to grow as full-fledged employees. If they come in and they become an employee, there's no real sensitizing of the other employees to take them up, to wrap them in or rope them in. So what has happened was that, and that was a fortunate thing that has happened lately, Orion engaged with bigger companies who do training, like Telebest, who came in and they adapted the training that's available, accredited training, to actually align with the abilities of people with disability. And I think that was a major step for all of us, because all of a sudden, with the development plans in place, these people could grow within their abilities. And it's important to mention that within the field of disability, and we're now talking about all disabilities, psychosocial, intellectual and physical disabilities, there are levels. You get the level 1 people that are able to grow, but or to function, and they don't need supervision. Once you've given them a task, they can do what's expected. Level 2 are those that are really able to work, or they can do the teeth brushing and all of that, but they need supervision. Level 3 are those that are really profound and do not only need supervision but care all the time. So in our organization, we need to assess each person, and that's very important, not only to almost dump them into a whole of service delivery and rehabilitation, but to really look at the individual, grow each one according to his or her capacity, functional level, and put that person in a position where he or she can grow to the maximum. And with stakeholders outside of the organization getting to link with us, to grow relationships, to build those relationships, we can actually put people not only in a position of education, development, growth, but also of a potential position later on.
And value to society.
Absolutely.
And a sense of self-worth that goes with that.
Absolutely.
And I mean, we'll hear from some of the employers that you work with a little bit later in the show. But one of the things I want to really get to grips with in the show is the reason why more companies aren't reaching out that hand and saying, we will partner with you. Is it a case of fear of the unknown, that many employers think it's going to be more difficult than it actually is? They're scared to make the accommodations that might be necessary to bring somebody into their company whose needs are a little bit different.
Papa, I want to actually support your remark now in saying that it's the fear of the unknown, the fear of costs that they would have to incur when they take somebody with disability. I think the employers out there do not make time, and maybe their HR departments would have to take more care of this division, but they need to buy into knowledge, getting to know what disability means. And our organization is taking pride in saying that we have a very close relationship with the local radio station, Radio Atlantis, and we have a weekly slot where we go and we do have a talk show, not maybe as professional as what it should be, but really in sharing information, because once they say knowledge is power. So if people know a little more about disability, the effect thereof on the person, and also how you can deal with that person in a workplace, it'll open so many doors. So we are trying to really not only market, but share. And that's what we also do with employers. They are not only scared, but they feel it's going to be costly. It's going to cost something. They've to start or get a new toilet facility, or they have to have a ramp, which is not always the situation. It's just a few changes here and there, but just to get people to understand that and to engage, not only with us, but with that disabled person, would be a number one answer.
Well, let's hope that process starts here today. One of the things you mentioned during our walk around the facility was that you sort of shifting your own thinking about how you operate here at Orion. We know times are tough economically everywhere. All NPOs are struggling for funding. You have very generous supporters. I'm looking at a long list that starts with the Department of Health and Social Development and mentions KFC and Impact and Bacoma Foods and Polyoke Packaging and Woolworths and PowerTech Transformers and some of the others we'll hear from later. That's fantastic. But you yourselves need to find a way of becoming sustainable to keep this facility going. Has it meant a shift in your own mindset of how you run this place?
Definitely so. We just had to open our minds from the traditional welfare attitude, that, this open hand kind of attitude where you stand and you wait for something to land in your hands that you can sort of use for operations. What we now have to make a change in is not only in our mindsets, but also sourcing, thinking. Development doesn't come on its own. We need to get out of this box of ours, and we need to do it ourselves. Nobody else is going to pick us out of the box and show us the world out there. So we are fortunate in having partners in the University of Stellenbosch Business School who's assisting with research on how to go about the whole social enterprise development. We need to actually find partnerships whereby income generation can run aligned with our present operations. Our services need to be there all the time, but alongside that, we need to have income generation operations, which is not necessarily an operation involving people with disability, but the outcomes thereof, the money generated, your profit should be plowed into services for people with disability. And that's where we stand at present. We need to become sustainable. We need to grow, because the need for the services of ours is huge. And if we are not going to do that, not going to stay aligned with growth and development, not only in South Africa, but in Europe and everywhere else, we are going to stay behind, and there's going to be no growth whatsoever, and disabled people are going to suffer.
Hanel Cronje, thank you again for having us here today. Hanel's the CEO of the Orion Organisation, and Veronica Pronk, the Marketing and Fund Development Manager. You might hear more from them in our coming segments as we focus in on the art development project here and their workshop space later on in the show.